So, Mr. Garg, my next question is that, and this would be relevant for people, especially students, because a lot of students go abroad for higher studies, and even let's say people who are in merchant navy, they are Indians, but they
Yeah.
are usually outside of India because of their job. So, I wanted to understand, like, are there any relaxations on these tenures for students, particularly of Indian origin, who are studying overseas, or let's say people who are in merchant navy? Uh, or what's your
Mhm.
take on that?
So I would like to address it differently. There's no relaxation as such, but there's a criteria for determining the number of days. So let's take Navy officers or the traders who work in international waters. And so how do we determine their residency status, whether they are an NRI or they are a resident Indian for taxation purposes? So that will entirely depend on the tenure of stay uh, on in the particular territory. Like, for example, if a person who spends more than 183 days in foreign territorial waters, they are considered as an NRI. However, if they are residing for a major part of the financial year in Indian territorial waters, they are considered as Indian citizens. So it will totally depend on the territorial waters in which they are operating in, their vessel is operating in, and whether they are on board that vessel and that vessel being in territorial waters or not. So that will
Mm.
determine it for the merchant navy officers or for the traders who are operating out overseas. Now, for students of Indian origin, when they apply for to study in universities, they will have to go abroad to study. They will not be staying back in India until and unless it's an online course. If it's a
Right.
full residential course or on-campus course, then they will be staying outside India. So as soon as they leave there, and then during that particular financial year, they are not there for more than 182 days, they will be counted as an NRI. So they will have to abide by the legal regulations accordingly out there.
Right. But I'm assuming for students, they probably don't have a taxable income as such, so it may not be as
It
much of a matter as compared to, let's say, people who are going for work purposes or merchant navy, for example, because they are getting an active
definitely.
income and they have to obviously file for an ITR. It would be more relevant for them. Am I right?
Definitely, you're absolutely right in that part. But there are cases where many Indians, many working professionals, they are go on a sabbatical leave. So,
Mm,
during that period in time, whatever savings they have, they still are earning income on that
right.
savings. So, in that purpose, that income
Mm,
will be taxable, and how much tax is applicable to them, what slab are they in, they are required to file return or
right.
not. That is where this comes into play.
Right. Right.
And many students, Parul, it happens in many cases where I have seen there's students who are doing their PhDs overseas. So
Mm,
they pick up some assignments overseas and they're earning out there as well. Uh,
stipends. Yeah, yeah.
Stipends. And their stipends are being paid in foreign currencies. And though
Mm,
their status out there will help us determine whether that income being received out there is taxable in India or not. That is why it's
right.
very important to understand their residency status.
Right. Talking of income, I think my next question is that what kind of income is taxable in India for NRIs? Because I think a classic example you gave is, let's say, people who are, let's say, getting these stipends, or even people who go for work, right? Or maybe, let's say,
Mhm.
people who are earning interest on their savings. So, or
Mhm.
maybe, let's say people who are just going out and they don't have any employment income in India, but let's say they are employed outside. So how do you break down these income, and what kind of income is taxable and non-taxable for NRIs in India?
A great question. So let's start. Let me help you answer this question by saying that it all depends on the residential status of an NRI. If your status is resident, then your global income is taxable in India. Very simple. If you are resident in India, then whatever you are earning by way of stipend, by way of salary, whatever sources of income you are having globally, that will become taxable in India. But if your status is as an NRI, then only your income earned or accrued in India is taxable in India. So let me list a few of the incomes that are considered as incomes earned or income accrued in India. So what are those 4 or 5 sources are? So first is the salary received in India for services provided in India. Even if you are categorized as an NRI, income from services rendered in India, regardless of where you receive the payment, that will be subject to taxation in India. So you are an NRI, you are rendering services in India, but you're receiving that salary income sitting out here in Australia. So then you cannot take that excuse that, look, I received the payment in Australian bank account. My salary was received in Australian bank account, so it won't be taxable. It is taxable because you are rendering those services in India
When you say
uh,
the render, what does that mean?
for an Indian company in Indian shows only.
Oh, okay.
You were an NRI because you stayed for less than 182 days, but those criteria we have already discussed. So, but major part of the year, financial year, you were outside India, you were working remotely. Let's say you are married, your husband got transferred, so you had to work remotely, but your entire services were being for a company in India, and your salary was getting paid in your Australian bank account or into your NRO or NRE account, wherever, but it will become taxable in India.
And that's a
So
foreign income or is an Indian income?
it's an Indian income because if you're
Right.
working for an Indian company. So
Mm-hmm.
income for services rendered in India, that's what I would like to categorically point out. So that is the first source of income. Then second is income from house property situated in India. So now income calculations aligns with the residential norms for NRIs, whether renting or leaving a property vacant, they can claim a 30% standard deduction that's given. They can offset property taxes as well. They can utilize their interest deductions, which they have interest deductions on the home loans which they have taken for buying that property. They're also eligible for Section 80C deductions on the principal repayment amount, along with claiming stamp duty and registration charges under the same section. So these are all allowable, but any rental income or any other income which you may earn from that house property, that will be taxable in India.
Rental mainly.
Rental mainly, right? So then this brings us to the third income. That's a capital gain on transfer of assets situated in India. Now, capital gains from transfer of assets, what are the assets we are talking about? First could be your shares, there could be a mutual funds, there could be properties, or any other asset like gold, some received gold or jewelry as an inheritance from their parents or their grandparents or for some family members. So any of those sale transactions, wherever their sales are happening, so that will involve some kind of gain or loss. So there will be either capital gain or there will be a capital loss. So those capital gains or loss are taxable in India. Capital loss is not taxable, but then you can take benefit of that to offset it in future
Right.
capital gains. So that's
Right.
the third source of income which I would talk about. Now the fourth source, this is interest income or incomes from fixed deposit or interest income from your savings bank account, the NRO account or NRE account. Not NRE, NRO account mainly. NRE is not taxable. NRO
Right.
account is taxable. So those earnings from fixed deposits or savings accounts in Indian banks are subject to taxation in India. Uh, NRE, FCNR accounts, those are exempt from tax. NRO accounts are fully taxable.
Right. 30%. I remember.
Yeah. So that is how it is.
Yes.
But then, Parul, it's very important to note that the 30% TDS does get collected out there, but you can claim a refund by filing an income tax
Yeah, of
return.
course. I
If
know that. But initially they deduct 30%, and I think I read an article somewhere why they do it is interesting because they feel that, oh, you are an NRI, so the government wants NRI to file for ITR because in the past a lot of NRIs were not filing for ITR. So that's why they would deduct the TDS at the highest bracket. And if you want to
Mhm.
get your refund back, you have to apply for a refund through an ITR. And that's the way government is collecting their taxes.
I would say I would partially agree, partially disagree with your
Okay.
statement. The reason why I say so, I would explain you that one as well. They don't, the income tax department in India or the government of India do not have jurisdiction over the citizens who are based outside India. So, in order to secure, and I've seen many cases happening in my past that where government was not collecting that much of TDS or this thing. Upon assessment, they would realize that the taxation was more, and there's
Mm,
no mean to recover that tax from the NRI because they don't have a jurisdiction.
correct.
Now, what happens? You reverse that situation. If you're collecting the TDS at the maximum rates applicable, the they are not shying away from giving that TDS refund back to the NRI. It's only that they need to show that income via their returns. And
Mm,
second reason primarily is that government of India and governments worldwide, they have entered into double taxation avoidance agreements,
mm,
DTAs. So what has happened is that no income in anywhere across the world. There are few exceptions out there, certainly.
yeah.
So they would like to everyone to count for each and every penny of which they are earning. They pay taxes. They can take tax credit in whichever home resident country they
Mm,
are in. But to do that, in order to help that facilitate that DTA agreements and
yeah.
to take benefit of that DTA agreements, they will require you to file that ITRs.
Right. Right. I think it would have obviously it helps everyone, I guess, right? So I think
Yes,
it's it's
yes.
it's fair. Cool. So Mr. Garg, my next question is, and a lot of my friends have asked this question time and again, and I keep reading about it, is that whether NRIs are required and by
Mhm,
law. I think there are two definitions, and then they give to by
mhm.
law, and then whether they are mandated to file for income tax return in India. Maybe if you can help explain with an example, that would be helpful.
Okay, sure. So, to answer this question, I would not say that it's mandatory to file. It like if you have just a 10,000 rupees of income, you need to file that return. But let's try and break it down. Let's try to not generalize that answer that it's mandatory or not mandatory. NRI must file their income in India if their income in India exceeds rupees 2.5 lakh for any given financial year or the previous year, which I just spoke about. So if that 2.5 lakh threshold is reached, then it's yes, it's mandatory to file a return. But it's not very a straight jacket answer. Now, if I would talk about that, when you were mentioning a while back that 30% TDS was deducted on your interest income. So let me take that example only, right? So let's take Parul, who has been working in Australia, resides in Australia, and for the previous financial year, when you were going through your 26 AS reports under your this thing, you noticed that there was a TDS entry of 20,000 rupees, the tax deducted at source of 20,000 rupees on the interest earned on your NRO account. You had just kept a small savings balance out there in your NRO account. The bank was paying you some interest, and on that interest, they deducted 20,000 TDS. So now, apart from that, you have no other income. Now, that does not obligate you to file the return at all.
Mm,
But how would you get the refund on this one? For
right. Right.
obtaining that refund, you will necessarily have to file an income tax return to show that
Mm,
I earned this income in the NRO in the form of interest on my NRO savings account. And on that, a 20,000 rupees TDS was deducted. Kindly give me the refund of that one.
okay, fair enough. So
And
either if, sorry, go ahead.
now, please,
No, I was saying, so either if your income is more than 2.5 lakhs in a given financial year, that's one of the criteria. And the second is if somebody wants a refund back, then of course they should apply for an ITR.
yes. And also, apart from this, as I stated earlier, when you have filed your return, you have claimed your refund back. Now, your NRO account income is nowhere reported in Australia by
Mm,
income tax department on their own. So you would be obligated to report that income in Australia by showing them that, look, I have filed this return. I had this source of income. It was not taxable out there in India. But given my residency status in Australia, I am a resident of Australia. This is my income. You can count that income, club that income, and deduct taxes accordingly.
mm. Okay. Okay, so I think for viewers, I think there are three things. I'll just summarize. One is that if your income is more than 2.5 lakhs in a given financial year. Second is if an extra TDS has been deducted and if you have to claim for that refund. And thirdly, for you to have a proof in your country of residence to show that there was a certain income which got added and you potentially have paid certain taxes back in India. That is the third reason. So these are the main three reasons why people should
Yes.
file. Should file, it's not mandated in case none of these three conditions apply.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. So, Mr. Garg, my last question, for this session is, and again, this is a question that has been asked so many times, is especially for senior citizens, and their query is related to the minimum income exempt from tax and whether
Mhm.
they are required to file an ITR in case their income is below the taxable limit. So we spoke about students, we spoke about people who are insured. What about senior citizens?
Okay, let me answer this question by taking an example. Let's take a case of Mr. Sharma. Right? He's a 68-year-old. He's an NRI. His total income in India is 2.95 lakhs, arising mainly from interest income in his NRO account or FD made through an NRO account. Now, for senior citizens between age group 60 to 80 years, uh, for resident Indians, the minimum tax slabs limit, which is exempt from income tax, is up to 3 lakhs. And for senior citizens, it is the exemption limit is up to 5 lakh rupees. But this exemption limits, these are the two ones which are not applicable to senior citizens NRI.
Okay.
So for them, the basic exemption limit comes down to 2.5 lakh rupees.
Oh,
So
okay.
then in that case, since he earned 2.95 lakh rupees as an interest income, so entire and it's above 2.5 lakh rupees, he will have to file income tax return.
Oh, okay. So they
And
don't
they
make
would
that special provisions for senior citizens who
senior
are NRIs,
citizen
only for residents. Okay.
race. For NRIs, the basic exemption limit remains at 2.5 lakhs, whether you are senior citizen or super senior citizen, or you are a normal citizen.
Right. So basically, that senior citizen is only applicable if that senior citizen extra advantage is only applicable if you are a resident Indian. But
Mhm.
in case if you are an NRI, it doesn't matter whether you're a senior citizen or you're not. The limit is 2.5 lakhs.
2.5 lakhs.
Okay. Okay, fine. I think yeah, that this has been an amazing episode. It's just the first episode, but I think I really learned a lot, and I'm sure the viewers would have learned a lot as well. Of course, I would encourage people if anything is not clear in this session, or if you have, I'm pretty sure you must be having questions, and feel free to share it with me or put it in the comment box, and Mr. Garg can take it in the following sessions, or we can respond to you as well offline. So thank you so much, Mr. Garg. I think it's been an amazing session, and we will have more such conversations in the near future. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, Parul. Thank you so much.
FMR Finance Weekly. Simplify your life with our financial advice.